Welcome back to the Anti-Meta Meta Club. This week's Race C, we are spoiled with a Group 3 race at Fuji that's extra long and has required strategy. There's kind of a meta car, but a few different cars work, and I've got a really good anti-meta car. Let's get into it. The anti-meta car of the week is the Citroen, and yes, I know I'm not really pronouncing that correctly. It's the first time the Group 3 Citroen's been competitive in probably years. It's probably GT Sport, and even though it's much harder to drive, I actually think it might be just as fast and as good as the Ferrari. I managed to put this thing in 72nd place with a 37.6, but I actually think a 0.3 or a 0.4 is possible. The Ferrari appears to be the meta, but a lot of the usual suspects, especially the MR cars, are viable as well. You'll see from my lap that there was a lot left in it. The starting line is pretty similar to how you take the line in the race and in your time trial, but you want to make sure you do everything you can to go all the way to the outside and then just cut to the apex, get in third gear, and floor it all the way down the straight. As we approach the first braking zone, I'm actually going to ask you to look for a few different things. Firstly, I want you to notice the kink. There's a kink in the road just to the left right before the 150 meter board, and then right before the curbing, you're going to see this dark mark. That dark mark on the track is exactly where I like to brake for the time trial, but that's incredibly difficult to see when you're in the race, especially if you're following someone really closely or if you're defending on the inside. So make sure that you note that it's about a car length and a half before the start of the curb on the left. Brake in a straight line heavily down to third gear and then turn in after the 50 meter board. You want to make sure that you're not heavily on the brakes as you trail brake in. I actually braked too much, which caused understeer. You can do this without dipping down to first gear, but if you brake really deeply, you can get to first gear, then pop it back up to second gear, hit that curb, and you can actually go probably a full tenth faster than I did here. Either way, you've got to get gently on that throttle and make sure you unwind the steering wheel as you do. Moving to the right in the next braking zone, you want to use the curb here, look for this red dot here on the fence, and then brake less than 100%, probably about 80%, and turn in before the 50 meter board. Your goal is to come entirely off the brakes before you approach the curb, turn in more, hit that curb as much as you can using only your right tires on the red and white part of the curb, and then get heavily on the throttle. You can track all the way out as long as your left tires are on the red and white and they stay on the left of the white line after that, then you should have a clean lap and not have to worry about dirty tires. At the end of the mossy concrete where the grass starts is about when I start turning in and lifting gently off the throttle. Looking at this red dot right here, that's when I know I want to dip down to fourth gear. You'll notice that I braked really gently after I lifted off the throttle and turned in a little bit more, but you don't always need to do that. A sharp lift off and then gently getting back on the throttle can actually get it to rotate in, and then if you get on the throttle gently enough, then it shouldn't cause any understeer. I like to use this concrete path to apex and make sure that I'm fully on the throttle before I get there, even if it starts pushing me wide to the outside of this corner. Staying full throttle as I continue to steer myself all the way to the right side of the track, I'm going to look for this red dot at the fence one more time. And if I'm far away from the corner and I'm aiming towards the outside, I like to make sure that I'm braking in proportion to how much I have to steer away. So if I'm adding steering to the left, I can't brake 100%. Quickly get down to second gear and turn in before you go under that sign. You want to use just the outside part of this curb in third gear and quickly get on that throttle. You'll see that I got on the throttle a little bit too much, which caused a little bit of rotation, and while that did help me, I wouldn't suggest trying to do that on purpose because it's very tricky to get the balance right. Again, you can use all the runoff as long as your tires are still touching the red and white part of the curb. Once again, we've got multiple things to pay attention to. You're going to be all the way past this Dunlop sign, and you want to brake just about where this orange mark on the inside is, but it's difficult to see that when you're trying to focus on placing your car in the correct position. Looking where the pavement changes colors right here, it's about 1.5 to 2 car lengths before that when you want to hit the brakes. Braking very heavily in a straight line, you'll notice this dark mark on the white line right here. You want to be turned in before you get to the end of that. You should be in second gear as you turn in, dipping down to first gear, and while you can use more of this inside curbing, if you miss it, you should have more grip and you can allow yourself to get further to the right to set up for this left-hander. Approximately when your nose gets to the red and white part of the curb here on the inside is when you want to turn in, lift after turning in, shift up to second gear, and then heavily get back on that throttle. Of course, you don't want to slide, so don't punch the throttle, but you've got to give it a lot of throttle up this hill. Make sure you cut this as much as you can. You just need your left tires on the red and white portion of the curb. Tracking out but continuing to curve as you stay on the throttle, you're going to look for the end of the grass here and make sure you don't dip your tires into the deep portion of the curbing here on the left. Lift off sharply at the end of the grass, turn in, and as the car starts turning in, add just a little bit of brake to tighten up the corner. If you go over the curb, which I do suggest, you have to be careful when you get on the throttle to make sure that the car doesn't unsettle and slide out. If it does, correct it immediately. Note once again that you only need your right tires on the red and white portion of the curb here. Turn in before you get to the pavement and be careful again for any kind of oversteer or understeer. You should already be turning in by here, and at the end of the curb, you want to completely lift off the throttle and then gently add brakes. And I mean gently. Look how much brake I'm using. When you track out past the middle of the track, dip down to second gear, add a little bit more brake, but then come entirely off it, turn in, and I do like to miss the curb here. You should be in third gear before the apex and then get on that throttle heavily, once again making sure that you know exactly how much you can track out. Aiming for the marshals in the distance, you want to trace the outline of the outside of the track and look for this red dot here on the left. Once you get past that is when you want to start adding just a little bit of brakes. Get down to second gear really quickly, and your goal is to come entirely off the brakes as early as you can and get on the throttle before you get to the apex in third gear. You can actually go wider on that final corner, but you're going to sacrifice a little bit of overall time for a better exit and getting on the throttle earlier, which will benefit you in the long run. If you take it a lot tighter, the opposite is true, so it's kind of up to you to balance what you want with that final corner. How you take that final corner will make a lot of difference in the race itself, but in time trial, you probably just want to go somewhere in the middle. Well, I like to have a perfect, exact place to hit the brakes. That's not always realistic, especially in race conditions, so it's important to note as many different references around your braking marker as you possibly can. Like I mentioned in the breakdown, I don't think I actually braked or turned in at the wrong time. I just had too much brake pressure, so I just caused understeer. It's imperative that you brake and turn in really quickly for this corner, but of course if you do it too quickly or if you take too much curb on either the inside or the out, you can very easily upset the balance of the car. You can track out even more than I did as long as you get all the way back onto the track before the end of the red and white curb. If you find yourself understeering in this braking zone, it's probably because you're braking too much for the amount that you're steering. You can't do 100% of both, and that's really important for every corner. I still see a lot of people going wide for these next two kinks. It's absolutely unnecessary. Just stay really close to the inside and then track out here when it comes to the next braking zone. You can use a lot more of this inside curb, and I think there's a lot of time in it if you do, but I chose to completely miss it because it allows the car to stay more stable and then I can get heavier on the throttle. This corner is kind of off camber, and then it also crests after the apex, so the car is going to get really light after understeering. It can cause the car to really slide out, and all of these curbs are really diabolical. You have to use the exit curbs sometimes, but you got to be careful not to put your tires in the gutter of the curbs. I don't know why they're shaped like that. This entire sector is kind of just a trap, so you got to be really careful, be really gentle on all of your throttle and braking inputs, and just be as smooth as you possibly can all the way through. Fuji is incredibly complex and incredibly tough, so this one might take a little bit extra time if you don't quite know it just yet. First and foremost, this race requires a little bit of strategy. You do have to go in the pits and you do have to use two different tire compounds. I'm not sure exactly which requirement that is, but if you have to use two different tire compounds, then obviously you have to go in the pits to do that. Unless you're starting in first or second place, I would not suggest starting on the soft compounds, and even then, it's actually going to be faster overall to start on the medium tires. The medium tires will be less susceptible to damage from the extra fuel weight, as well as all of the traffic that you're going to encounter at the beginning of the race, and then you'll have the bonus of having a second stint that has really soft tires, and you're going to have a lot less fuel to deal with as well, and you probably won't have to deal with any traffic either. Let's say theoretically you and an opponent both had approximately the same complete finishing time for the race, though you start on completely different tire strategies. Let's say you start soft first and then finish on the mediums, while your opponent, who is just as fast as you, starts on the medium first and finishes softs. They'll still have an advantage because they could have your slipstream and they're going to have more grip in each of the corners. It's just better overall to start on the medium compound. There are even more reasons why, but we don't really have to get into that. If someone in front of you is on the soft tires at the beginning and you manage to somehow keep up with them for the entirety of the lap, then the advantage that they have because of the soft tires will be completely nullified as soon as you get to this super long straight. With all that in mind, I like to go between laps 8 and lap 10 to switch from the medium tires to the soft tires. Because of how challenging Fuji is and how long it's been since we've had Fuji, you're going to find that people who are usually as fast as you may be faster or slower than you when it comes to this track, especially when it comes to the final sector. And you're also going to find that people who are not in an MR car, unless it's the AMG or the Lexus, are probably not going to be very fast in the final sector whatsoever. The straight is also so long that you're going to build up so much speed and momentum if you have slipstream from other people that your braking distance is going to be much much longer than you might expect. And you have to pay attention, of course, to the fact that your medium tires are going to brake a lot differently than your soft tires. You're going to have to adjust and brake early for both of those. And you'll find that when you chase people really closely, and you can see that I'm doing it right here, I like to actually completely come off the throttle and even add a little bit of brake when it comes to approaching the braking zones. Long before the braking zones, you can slow yourself down, lose a little bit of momentum, but still keep up with the drivers going into the corners, as long as you're really careful not to do it too early and cause people behind you to run into you. I'm going to encourage you to check out your rear view mirror as often as you can, or of course, if you don't have a rear view mirror, just keep looking behind you going into turn 1, because lots and lots of people are going to completely miss their braking zone. When it comes to defense on this specific corner, sometimes it's better to stay on the outside, because not only will you have a better position to go into this next hairpin if you're on this side of the track, you can also just carry more momentum on the outside. So if you trust the person you're racing with, it might always be better to stay on the outside there. If you do find yourself defending on the inside of the hairpin and the person you're racing with does somehow manage to get all the way on the outside of you, be very careful not to run into them. If you hit them, it's probably going to ruin both of your races, because you're going so slow, you don't have any kind of aerodynamics, and you're probably just going to turn both of you around. Once again, because this straight is so incredibly long, you have to do everything you can to make sure that you're staying with the pack ahead of you. If you lose the pack ahead of you, it's probably going to be very difficult to maintain the pace. And especially in the higher lobbies, you'll find that usually a group of people towards the front are going to be working together, or at the very least sticking together, and it's going to be impossible to catch them by yourself if they are working together. If you find people bump drafting down the front, which is something that I love to do, it's going to be very difficult to catch them without someone also bump drafting you. And of course, the more people you have doing that, the faster you'll go. Now, like I mentioned before, it's really important that if you're slowing down too early, you don't do it way too early there. I did slow down a little bit earlier than I should have, and Burgerinos was not prepared for that. Because of that, he had to dodge me. He might have made that corner without the fact that he had to dodge me, but since he had to dodge me, that greatly increased his braking distance, and it caused him to hit our friend Damien. In all fairness, it is still his responsibility to make sure that he can slow down properly, but of course, if I brake way too early, which it's possible I did there, then I could also share some responsibility in that incident. So I'm sorry, Damien, I didn't directly hit you again, but I possibly caused that. Who knows? It was probably my fault. Either way, I found myself completely out of slipstream, but it didn't matter too much because everyone ahead is so close. In the final sector, if you find yourself close to other drivers, you're probably not going to be able to go nearly as fast as you would if you were by yourself. And as you can see, because everyone is jockeying for position, I cut down from 1.1 seconds all the way down to less than 3/10 behind Bacon Slayers. What looked like just an unforced error right there was actually Slayers' wheel giving out. His wheel was completely malfunctioning, and I really hope he's able to fix it or get a replacement, because I love racing with Slayers. After only 3 laps, I found myself behind Voidsy, who happened to be in the exact same car as I was, and we were right behind 2 Ferraris and in front of 1 Ferrari. So of course, I was going to do everything I could to try to help Voidsy, give him a push, use the slipstream and the bump drafting to try to get ahead of both of those guys and away from Velasa, and we could really show what this car can do. I want to give a special shout out to both Voidsy in front and Velasa behind. Both of these guys are actually controller drivers, and as you can see, they have no problem keeping up in the top split. With a carefully timed bump draft as well as a carefully timed brake, we found ourselves completely in front of all of the Ferraris, and now Voidsy was in 4th and I was in 5th. Not much else happened until the beginning of the next lap, when Voidsy and I found ourselves hard charging against yet another Ferrari. With Voidsy directly next to the other Ferrari, I figured I possibly had a chance to sneak right in, and I was able to do so cleanly, giving him space on the exit, and we both got in front of that Ferrari. Once again showing exactly what this car can do against the Ferrari. At the beginning of the lap, Voidsy was already close enough to try to pass Conver, but throughout the entirety of the lap, Conver defended extremely aggressively while simultaneously missing almost every single one of his apexes. Because of this, we were going so much slower than Hoyos expected. Hoyos ran directly into me as we were leaning onto the front straight. Now that ruined both of our momentum, so I wasn't able to catch up with Voidsy. I couldn't provide any kind of bump draft or slipstream, and that meant he had to battle Conver by himself. Conver in the meta car, completely missing every one of his apexes. You might be wondering why I'm talking this way about Conver. It's because he was incredibly dirty multiple times throughout this week as well as last week. I did not enjoy racing him. Now, Hoyos, like I mentioned before, also missed his braking there, going directly into Voidsy, and that put us back in the exact same situation that we were in the last lap. All the way at the end of lap 7, and Conver is doing the same thing, except this time he luckily missed the apex so much that Voidsy was able to get all the way in the inside. Of course, everyone is entitled to defend, but if you look at the right, you can see that our pace was incredibly slow as he was defending the entirety of the lap. That's not going to benefit anyone, including him. It's just going to slow him down so much that he's going to lose multiple positions when he finally does lose a position. Because of this, I was able to bump draft Voidsy, and this is what he decided to do in return. Paying attention to when he can get behind me rather than when he should brake, he didn't brake whatsoever as I was starting to brake, punting me all the way almost entirely off the track. This is exactly what he's been doing since last week. I had never actually raced against him until last week, and this is what he's been doing the entire time I've known him. I have no qualms with calling out bad behavior and bad driving. So Conver, if you're watching this, you need to change how you drive, period. With Conver out of the way, there was only one person in front of Voidsy, and of course I lost a position to Damien. Before I talk about that, I want to note this is how you should take the pit entrance. You do not need to slow down a lot, and as long as you don't hit that cone, you can actually hit the wall and still be totally fine. You need to really attack that pit entrance. Now, as you can see, Damien got ahead of me, and it was pretty easy because Damien is a multiple world record holder, and I pretty much never stand a chance against him. Despite all of that, I decided I was going to try whatever I could to try to beat him, so I went for an undercut. Actually, it wasn't even an undercut. An undercut would have been pitting on lap 8. Instead, I pit on lap 9, coming out on lap 10, and when you do come out of the pits, you should brake well before that last line at the pit exit. Anyways, my plan was to use my outlap to try to get ahead of Damien as he comes out of the pits and hopefully defend against him and potentially attack Voidsy. As I approach the pit exit on my first flying lap, you can see that it does appear to have worked. Not only am I right next to Damien and possibly going to be able to get around him, which I did, I was also very close to both Voidsy and our friend Zwart. Still not completely ahead and free of Damien, I was in the advantageous spot here on this corner, and I was able to completely get the corner. Now, you probably know what I was thinking. Damien is directly behind me in an AMG with fresher tires, and this little advantage I had is not going to last long, and indeed, it did not. While the AMG does seem to be superior to the Citroën, it doesn't really matter because even if we had switched cars, Damien still would have passed me there because Damien is Damien. Sticking with the pack all the way to the end of the lap, you can see that Damien got just a little bit of a penalty and he had to serve that, and not only that, our friend Voidsy also went off in that final corner and he was going to have to serve a penalty on the very next lap. Now, since Voidsy was able to pass Zwart on the straight, he didn't have to waste any time trying to pass Zwart on the infield, and Zwart was doing a very good job of holding me off the entire time. So even though Zwart had to serve that penalty and I got ahead of him pretty quickly, Voidsy was able to stay so far ahead that even though he served that penalty at the same time, I wasn't even able to get even close to him going into the next lap. With all of that, Voidsy also had tires that were a full lap fresher than mine, and with this multiplier, it makes it very difficult to pull off anything when you have older tires. But not only that, even if I had the exact same tires as Voidsy, Voidsy is very fast, and it still would have been a hell of a battle. I probably still would not be able to easily get next to him or get by him at all. On top of all that, because I was battling Zwart for so much, Damien was also right behind me once again. I don't want to deprive you guys of watching a good race, but unfortunately, Damien just got ahead of me really easily and there was nothing I can do. I do think if I had fresher tires, I might have been able to provide some kind of battle, but I think Damien was always going to beat me no matter what, and with the luck of the race, I couldn't even battle Voidsy whatsoever. But I was very happy with a third place finish after starting all the way in the back with both of the two gentlemen who started in front of me who were not in the Metacar, I might add. I also want to give a shout out to Outlaw Quadrant, who finished in 7th place ahead of a lot of the different Ferraris in an F-Type on his first day back on the wheel after a long and heavy recovery from a surgery. Outlaw, you're amazing. Thank you for watching my video. If you liked what you saw, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And of course, I'll be making another one of these guides every single week. I'm going to leave you with a look at my current members. I love every one of you. Thank you.